It only got me thinking about how information from the UFO world leaks into public view. And specifically, has that process changed, or how has that process changed over time? So you go back to the 1970s, you have a very small but determined little ecosystem of UFO periodicals. The MUFON UFO Journal, Flying Saucer Review over in Britain, APRO Bulletin, and there's a bunch of others. They didn't get huge distribution, but they're very serious-minded and quite sophisticated, even if they didn't have any mainstream media supporting them. They managed to surface many remarkable stories. This magazine is one of them, even though it lasted just very briefly. All of the other authors of the articles in here were very sophisticated. They had, there's a thing on anomalies of Mars. I mean, interesting. It's not badly done. Military bases under siege by US UFOs. I read this article. It's a good one. It's actually quite good. And the USO article is very good. There's a thing on Foo Fighters here. And in fact, this has a photograph of a I want to just show you this. This just shows you like how cool these things are. Of a very young George Fawcett. I don't know if you remember, that's George Fawcett. He is the co-author of a book that would come out in a couple of years from after this called Clear Intent, which he co-authored with Barry Greenwood. It's a classic UFO book. It was the first one really ever to have a lot of declassified government documents in it. So George Fawcett gets a picture in this. You can tell, like, whoever was putting this magazine together, they had their pulse on good, legitimate research. So that was kind of the ecosystem that existed at the time. Getting these remarkable stories, like the FDR story that I just read to you. So contrast that with today. So now we're in an age of, instant communication. But I really wonder, is the quality of the leaks as good as what existed back in these days? So we've had some good ones. We've had the 2004 Nimitz encounter that you could say kind of came out a few years ago. The USS Roosevelt, 2014 and 2015, off the Atlantic coast, Ryan Graves, the drone swarm, 2019 and 2020, the USS Omaha. Like, those are legitimate and good leaks of UFO data that have come out to us. So we've had some good ones, and they've helped to change our public conversation and all of that. They've reached the mainstream. But I think there's less coming out today than what came out in the past. The difference is that in the past, it wasn't going anywhere. It was making no mainstream impact whatsoever. And it really reminds me, it's like today we basically are depending on a handful of, insiders, do I call them that? And the credentialed reporters that are doing this are very few and far between. I mean, I guess you could say Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal. They're sort of mainstreamish, but there's really not much else that is really covering this. But in years past, we had an amazing grassroots kind of slow drip investigations that were just done. Very quiet, often very local, but effective. And I don't know that we really are duplicating that today. So the internet gives us a great scale, but it's also giving us a lot more noise, more literal chatter by folks who have their YouTube channels, their own internet, whatever. But are they actually doing genuine research on the actual UFO, UAP phenomenon? Very little of our public conversation actually deals with UFO encounters. It's like we discuss everything about this except the actual phenomenon. That's really what this is. I mean, even I mean, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times articles, they don't deal with UFOs at all, except to say it's just an op. The Hill article does support the reality of UFOs, but doesn't really get into any genuine specific cases. So, whereas that's what it's all about, and we almost never discuss actual cases, let alone things like abductions, which I talked about in my last video here for you. So, back in the 70s, like, very few people, almost no one knew about these types of articles, these leaks, but they were happening. Now more people are aware, but it seems to me that the actual flow of new information feels a little bit thinner. Like the leak rate is down, but the visibility is up. So are we really more informed? Oh, or are we more managed? We in the UAP arena here are in a lot of ways fighting a bit of an uphill battle for truth, and in this year and beyond. Because in a way you could say we're entering in a post-truth world, in the sense that we have algorithm-driven fragmentation in this digital age of ours. We have all these echo chambers and bubbles that people are within their own little bubbles. So all beliefs are very polarized now, much more. I mean, it's not that we were not polarized 50 years ago before the internet. Yes, there were political polarization, but it's clearly orders of magnitude different today. At least that's what I think. And partly because of the algorithms, and partly because we're all just being reassured in our own private biases and beliefs much more than it used to be. So we're fragmented. So that makes rational discourse much more difficult. And in the UFO field, you have people who are either fervent believers or dismissive skeptics. So that is a problem right there. And then we have the whether you want to call it propaganda or disinformation or misinformation, depending on your perspective. If you're an establishment person, you're going to talk about the dangers of misinformation. And, you'll say, well, there's a lot of people out there. They're well-meaning, but they believe in conspiracy theories and they are misinformed. From their point of view, that's a problem. From my point of view, I'm a little more concerned about the role of propaganda, that is government-sponsored mis- or disinformation, propaganda, essentially. Both of those are an issue, frankly, right? So the ease of spreading fake information, whether by government operatives or just by people, that's much easier than ever before. And then now it's compounded by, whatever AI and deep fakes can do. I mean, so really we're in a place where the credibility of a lot of genuine UFO or UAP evidence is now being questioned. So that will further entrench skepticism. And then on top of that, we are dealing in our world with tremendous resistance from the establishment on this subject of UFOs. And we must not forget this. The mainstream media outlets continually either dismiss UAPs as fringe conspiracy theories, they still do it, or they just don't cover it. I mean, it's one thing. All right, so Ross Coulthart's on News Nation. Great. News Nation has a good listenership. Very glad about that. But we're still not talking ABC or CNN or the establishment, despite the fact that it is becoming the fringe in a sense. Less viewers probably than what News Nation gets. I agree with you. But the fact is that News Nation is still not plugged into the established power nexus, like connected to like Wikipedia. So like if something's on the establishment news, Wikipedia or the other national or the academic community, the world of the prestige, the world of power and prestige is still totally on board with the legacy news media. So that news media, which is the bastion of the establishment, they do not They do not promote the UAP subject at all. Not at all. I mean, you think about, like even the New York Times, which, okay, they broke, with 2 articles, the first really mainstream UFO stories back in 2017. Yes, thank you, Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal. Very good. But it's no question, the New York Times itself was very resistant to what Leslie and Ralph were trying to do. They were very resistant. And what follow-up have they done? What follow-up have they done to, like, David Grush? None. They wrote a very snarky op-ed piece against David Grush saying, you whistleblowers have got to provide some evidence. There was no attempt to investigate, nothing. So, and we get that throughout the entire establishment. So they are very dismissive of this subject. Despite the fact that, we've had some government initiative. We've had the UAP task force. We've had NASA studies, which themselves were, I think, very problematic. But the media has just been very reluctant to engage in a substantial way with this topic. So the public is really left misinformed, literally, and, well, indifferent. They just don't really, they don't, most people, I think, still do not care because, frankly, they have not had the case brought to them in the proper manner. I think it's that simple. And those of us who hang out at websites like this one or other alternative media sites, we know better. But we have to remember, like most of the world still does not. It's incredible to consider this. When we're in our kind of anti-establishment or questioning authority mode, which I think most of us here at this site are, a lot of the world still doesn't really do that, or at least they think they do, but they really don't. So they're still being spoon-fed the propaganda. So there's that. And then beyond that, beyond the media establishment, you just have the U.S. government, U.S. intelligence community has a long history of secrecy and previous debunking efforts, with Robertson Panel and the Condon Committee. Even the shift from UFO disclosure to UAP transparency, I've mentioned this a few times. I think this is, I can understand the motivations of some of the people who did this, but it really does play into the hands of those who want to maintain scientific skepticism about the subject. I've talked about this enough times. I don't need to revisit it here, but I believe that it does.